What's up guys, my name is Ace, and when Warzone first launched, I made a video talking about 12 things that you probably didn't know about Warzone, many of which are designed to help your game, some of which are just kind of like interesting facts that a lot of people didn't catch. And that was a very popular video, a lot of people really enjoyed that, so it's time for round 2. I've got 10 more things that many of you will not know about Warzone. Now, really quick before we get into this, just wanted to remind you guys that I do now have a Discord server, and in the near future, I'm planning on setting up a system where I can play with people that are in the Discord server. So if you guys are interested in that, I will leave a link to the server down below, and you can join from there. Let's get back to the video. Now, I do want to give a big thank you to you guys, the community, for letting me know some of these things in the comments of the previous video, or just letting me know in my stream. A few of these are just from people telling me interesting facts. Some of them are tested by myself as well, though, but let's hop into it. The first tip that some people know about, but a lot of people still haven't seen yet, if you're using a self-revive in a squad-based mode, if you get downed, you can start the process of reviving yourself. And then as long as a teammate comes in before you finish self-reviving, they can actually take over that revive right where you left off with your self-revive. And then once you're back on your feet, you've still got a self-revive. Now this is really handy because your teammate can watch over you while you initiate that self-revive instead of putting their gun away, so they can kind of cover you during the start of that revive. And then if you've got good communication, they just come in at the last second, finish off the revive for you, and their gun is only down for about a second or so. And therefore, that just maximizes the amount of time they're in the fight, so if the other team that downed you is pushing now, they can defend themselves a lot more effectively. And on top of that, you don't waste that self-revive at that point. You still get to keep it for the next time you get downed. Now, moving on to the second tip that I have for you guys, I've had so many people asking me, how far can you fall without dying in Warzone? Like, exactly how far can you fall? And how do you know if you need to open your parachute or if you'll be just fine dropping down without opening a parachute? Because, as you guys probably know, opening a parachute is actually very, very loud in the current state of Warzone. On top of that, of course, if you do open your chute, that means you have to put your gun away and there's a certain animation that's involved. So if there's an enemy that you're trying to challenge, you're putting yourself at a big disadvantage opening a chute when you otherwise wouldn't need to. So I actually went in and did a bunch of testing on this to find the exact distance that you can fall without dying. And in Warzone, this magic number is 13 meters. So if you're ever in a situation where you want to know if you're going to be able to survive that fall without a parachute, maybe you're like planning your exit strategy from your little piece of high ground, and you've got some time to plan this out to see if you are going to need to open your chute, all you have to do is go up to the edge of whatever you want to drop off of, look straight down, and then drop a waypoint right there. That will show you the distance you are to the ground at that time, and if that distance is 13 meters or less, you will survive without opening your chute. If it's greater than 13 meters, you do need to open your parachute. And this leads us directly to the next tip that I have for you guys in this video. And this one, I do fully understand. For a lot of people, this is common sense, but I am still getting asked a lot about this, so I did want to bring it up in a video here. If you ever need to know how far away you are from something, just drop a waypoint on it, and it'll tell you exactly how many meters. I've had plenty of people tweeting me videos of really nice sniper shots that they had, and they want me to estimate how far that distance was. You don't need me to estimate that for you. Just drop a waypoint wherever you hit that shot, and that will tell you exactly how far away it was. Now, with that waypoint, you don't have an infinite range with that, so if you are hitting a shot at a ridiculous range, like 600 meters, yeah, you won't be able to drop a normal waypoint. You have to actually open up the map, then you have to kind of find where your target was on the map, and you can drop a waypoint from there and still see the distance. But in either case, if you're ever wondering how far that shot was that you hit, that's all you have to do, drop a waypoint. Now, on that same topic of measuring distances, one thing that I haven't seen measured by anybody before, so I decided to go and do this for myself, is just how far away will red dots appear on the minimap when you either call a UAV in and you ping a player that doesn't have Ghost, or if they're just firing an unsilenced weapon. How far away can you see those dots? Turns out this distance appears to be exactly 250 meters. So if you are seeing a red dot on the minimap or on your compass, this means that player is within 250 meters from your current location. Next up, something that I'm a little bit embarrassed to admit I didn't notice or didn't realize is if you're flying a helicopter, you have a set of flares that you can use to basically deflect a rocket away from you. Now, for people that fly in helicopters all the time within Warzone, I'm sure you already know this. This is more so for the people like me, where I rarely get into a helicopter, but sometimes I do. And there have been many situations where somebody locks onto me with a launcher, And because of this, I just bail out of the helicopter, when if I would have known that there were flares, I could have at least deflected one of those rockets away and stayed in that helicopter a little bit longer, and maybe long enough to get out of that person's line of sight completely. Now, I know when you first get in a helicopter, it tells you exactly how to do this. You hit L1 or R1 if you're playing on controller. I don't know what the button is for mouse and keyboard, but you should see it when you first get into the helicopter. And it should be noted that this is just a one-time use per helicopter. So yeah, just always keep that in mind if you are flying a helicopter. You do have a set of flares at your disposal. Getting into the next tip that I've got for you guys, this one's quite interesting. Breakable windows in buildings might be your friend, and you might not want to destroy them if you happen to be in a situation where you're in a building looking out. Now, the reason for this is, first off, there's often a lot of glare on windows, so it can be very difficult to see inside a window from the outside, whereas if you're inside, you can see out just fine. This is especially true if you're backed off a little bit in the room and you're not right up against that window. It's going to be much more difficult for a player without a thermal sight to be able to see you. That's a bit more obvious. The more important thing here is something I've noticed, keeping in mind I can't test this in custom games to be absolutely certain, but I've noticed pretty consistently when I snipe through a window with an AX50 and I get a headshot, I've noticed that I always get a hit marker here. Even when I know it's a headshot, I get the actual headshot hit marker, which is different from a body shot hit marker. So what I suspect is going on here is that glass actually reduces your damage just enough to where it won't be a one-shot kill against a fully armored enemy, whereas if it were a direct shot where it doesn't go through glass, then it would be a one-shot kill. Now, after recording that bit, I actually did manage to get 2 accounts within the same lobby very briefly, and I was able to test this one thing with the AX50, and I can confirm that this is the case. If you're shooting through glass with the AX50, you will not get a one-shot kill to the head if the enemy has full armor. Unfortunately, I wasn't in that lobby for long enough to be able to test the HDR as well, so I'm not 100% sure if the HDR is the same way, and I also don't know if you have FMJ on that, maybe you won't get that same damage reduction, and therefore maybe you still can get a one-shot headshot. But it is important to know, if you are an AX50 sniper, and you are planning on shooting through a window to hit somebody in the head, it will not be a one-hit kill. So if you're in a building, it might be in your best interest to not break the glass in front of you, because it just might save your life if somebody tries to snipe at you. On the flip side of that though, if you are trying to snipe out of a window, you probably want to break that glass because that could prevent you from getting a one-shot headshot. And on top of that, if you're using a thermal sight, at least currently, it's bugged out where you can't see from the inside out through a window, but you can see from the outside in through a window. It's very strange. So yeah, if you are using a thermal sight, you will have to break that glass just so that you can actually see your targets when looking out the window. Moving on to the next tip that I've got for you guys, and I found this one to be quite helpful. When you're in a situation where you're respawning in after winning a gulag, for instance, unless you're going back to regroup with your teammates or try and collect your own loot, if you want to find a good new place to land on the way down, pay attention to the map as you're dropping in. So I'd recommend opening your chute right away so you don't drop in way too fast. Pull up your map, zoom in a little bit, and look for areas where there's a lot of contracts still available. Now, the reason you want to do this is if there's a particular area where there's still a lot of contracts that haven't been touched, it's much more likely you'll be finding unlooted areas around here compared to the other areas where there's no more contracts available. And the reason for that, of course, is most people just tend to pick up contracts as they find them. And therefore, if you see an area where there's no contracts available, it's almost guaranteed that that area has been looted. Whereas if there's an area where there's still a bunch of contracts that haven't been touched, there's a much better chance that that hasn't been looted yet. Now, it's not completely foolproof because, yes, people do ignore contracts from time to time and they'll still loot around the area. It's just going to improve your odds of finding loot off of that respawn. Speaking of dying and respawning, a really big question that a lot of people have had that I haven't seen anybody test is what happens to the money when you die? A lot of people have been noticing that when somebody dies, it seems like a lot of the money just disappears and they're wondering, where did that go? So I went in and did the testing on this for myself, collected a bunch of cash, killed myself, and then came back to that death location just to see exactly what happens with all the money here. And it turns out the first thing is you will keep 20% of the cash that you had on you. You'll keep that in your inventory. So when you go to the gulag, if you win your gulag and you respawn, you will respawn with 20% of what you had from the moment you went down. As for the rest of the cash, it turns out you only drop 50% of the total amount that you had on the ground for people to be looting off of you. The other 50% just disappears into thin air. So just as an example here, if you had exactly 10,000 cash when you die, you will take 2,000 with you into the gulag and you'll respawn with 2,000 assuming you win your gulag. As for the cash that you drop on the ground, in this situation, you would drop 5,000 cash on the ground, and the other 3,000 cash that's unaccounted for, that just disappears. Just a couple more tips to get through here. The next one is understanding airstrikes. When you call a precision airstrike in within multiplayer, the planes will come in from pretty much a random direction, or it seems random at least. In Warzone, it is not random. The planes will always come in from the direction that you called that airstrike in. This is significant if you're calling an airstrike in, because then you'll know that that rectangular damage path will always be going straight forward from the direction you call that in from. But on top of that, if somebody calls an airstrike in on you and you are currently in a battle with that team, so you know where that team is, you generally want to try and escape that by going perpendicular away from that enemy team. You don't just want to pull a 180 and try and run straight backwards away from them, because that won't get you out of the damage area nearly as quickly or effectively as running perpendicular. Additionally, if you happen to be just a third party in that situation where you see an airstrike being called in against a different team, you can use the information of the flight path of that precision airstrike to give you a good indication of where a team is. This is especially true as you get a little bit later into the game when the circle has started closing in. If you see an airstrike called in on the map, there is definitely a player or a team early on along the flight path of that precision airstrike. So finally, the 10th tip that I have for you guys in this video, and again, this is another one of those tips where for a bunch of people, they'll already know this, but this is something that took me an embarrassingly long time to actually realize existed. If you have a bounty called in on yourself, you'll actually get a threat level indicator under your minimap, and this will give you a general indication of how far away that enemy player is to you. Now, I really wish we had access to custom games so I could get you the exact distances here, but it's a 3-bar system. One yellow bar means they're still pretty far away from you. They could be all the way across the map, or they could be like 250 plus meters away from you. I don't know the exact distances there, but just know if you've got one yellow bar, that means you're not usually in immediate danger. Unless you're out in the open, maybe they'll try and snipe you from a really long distance away. But then we have the 2 orange bars, which means they're getting a little bit closer, and then finally the 3 red bars, and that means they are very, very close to you. Now again, without custom games, I can't test this with perfect accuracy, but if I had to guess, I would say 1 bar means they are more than 250 meters away from you. 2 bars is roughly 75 to 250 meters away if I had to guess, and then 3 bars seems to mean they're about 75 meters from you. Again, those are just rough estimates, they might be off by a little bit, but it is still important to know that that threat level is very important to help you prepare for a situation when you have a bounty called in against you. Now that's 10 things, but I've got one bonus for you guys, just a follow-up from yesterday's video. There's been a lot of confusion about situations where when you get shot, you end up receiving damage to both your armor and your health at the same time, and the speculation was that's FMJ, which I confirmed that is not the case, and it has now been confirmed that this is due to stopping power. Now, I was planning on trying to get the testing done for this, but JGod beat me to it, so big shout out to JGod for figuring this out and confirming it for sure. Now we finally know what's going on in those situations. But with that, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on 10 more things that you might not have known within Warzone. I'm interested in hearing from you guys in the comment section below. What other tips would you have? And also, out of the tips that I shared in today's video, which ones did you not know before going into this video? If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.